So Larry Elder destroys the Breakfast Club, part 3, coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Common Sense Logical Reason. And as always, I want to say thank y'all for joining me in this video. So this is part 3 of the interview that Larry Elder did on the Breakfast Club. Now, he really is showing the Breakfast Club who they really are, and that is a typical bunch of brainwashed black people who repeats narratives that they've been brainwashed for all their life. And despite of evidence that they are wrong in what they believe, they still believe it. And this is years of brainwashing and indoctrination. So anyway, let's continue with the interview.
In fact, twice as many blacks said failure to take advantage of available opportunities is a bigger problem than racism.
That was 1997.
1997. Look it up.
It's 2023, though.
You think America's more racist now after the election and re-election of Barack Obama than it was in 1997?
Yes, because of the election of MAGA, Donald Trump, 100%. Yes.
Really?
Okay.
Again, this is just more repeat what you've been told. Okay, MAGA is not racist. There's absolutely nothing at all racist about making America great again. You know, MAGA is not about making America great for white people and crappy for everybody else. You know, if America is great, better economically, that's going to benefit all Americans, not just white Americans. So, you know, this is just, like I say, just brainwashing on the part of Charlemagne. You know, he doesn't know that Donald Trump is racist. He's been told that Donald Trump is racist, which Donald Trump is absolutely not a racist. You know, you can go watch the interview, any interview that Judge Joe Brown did when he talks about this all the time, where back in the 80s and 90s, black people had to go to Donald Trump to get business loans when they wouldn't be qualified otherwise. You know, and he would give blacks loans, and then when they would come back to pay what they were supposed to pay, he would rip up the contract and tell them to go run their business. Does that sound like somebody that hates black people? And then on top of that, he was given awards by the NAACP, as well as Jesse Jackson, for his hiring practice and treatment of black people. And then there was the homeless woman. You know, there was a homeless woman who was found in one of his hotel rooms, and they were going to kick her out, but he didn't. He let her stay in a room, and basically she had 3 meals a day, always made sure she had fresh flowers every morning. And she stayed in this hotel for 5 years. And then there's the policy that so many people, I mean, I'm not even going to go into the policies that he enacted that helped and benefit black people in his 4 years. So if Donald Trump is a racist, he must be one of the worst racists ever. He's a horrible racist, because everything he's done has basically benefited black people for the most part.
Absolutely.
Well, how is it, Charlemagne, that Donald Trump got 8% of the black vote in 2016? He got 12% in 2020, a 50% increase. He got 20% of the black male vote in 2020. If MAGA is racist, how do you explain that Donald Trump substantially increased the percentage of black votes?
I want to ask you about that. You know, after 4 indictments, 91 criminal charges, don't you think it would behoove the Republican Party to move on from Donald Trump?
Again, these charges against Donald Trump is BS, and is basically proven to be that way. But why would the Republican parties want to move on from Trump? I mean, Donald Trump is basically making the Republican Party more popular amongst people who didn't like the Republican Party. More and more black people are starting to snap out of their trance, starting to walk away from the Democratic Party. And this is mostly because of Donald Trump. So if anything, the Republican Party should latch on to him, because he's bringing more support to them and bringing more support to their message. And so I would say that, you know, the Democrats walking away from Trump would be stupid on their part. But anyway, as Larry Elder also said, you know, regardless of Trump, Biden or Clinton, regardless if they had indictments or so on and so forth, I still would support for them, because I don't support their political views. I do not support their political views. So regardless of any indictments, the fact is, yes, I think they should that should stay with Trump. I mean, if the Republican Party was smart, they would do this. They would stay with Trump and ride this train to more popularity. Even though I myself is not a Republican, I'm just an independent conservative.
You're a conservative, right? Obviously.
No question.
What initially made you gravitate towards being a conservative?
Well, I can't speak for Larry Elder here. Now, I'm a firm believer in letting everybody speak for themselves. So I can't tell you why Larry Elder's conservative, but I can tell you why I'm conservative. And again, I've told this story before. I've done videos about this, but the reason why I'm conservative is, number one, I've always been conservative. And basically, logical people tend to be conservative because conservatism makes sense. But what made me realize that I was a conservative was basically back during the Second Gulf War. When the Second Gulf War was going on in 2003, 2004-ish, there was a local radio station in my area that was giving 24-hour coverage of the war, and I would listen to it as much as I could, just keep up what progress was being made, what was happening in the war. Well, eventually the war died down, and once this happened, they went back to the regular scheduled programming, which was basically our local conservative radio show station. I didn't know they exist. And overnight, I had a job overnight, and I would listen to what was going on with the war the whole entire time, just trying to, like I said, keep up what was going on with the war effort. But at night, once they start going back to the regular scheduled programming, what they would do was rebroadcast a lot of the shows that happened in the daytime, such as the late Rush Limbaugh. I had heard of Rush Limbaugh before because I heard black people say that he's racist, but I had actually never listened to the man. So I listened to Rush Limbaugh really truly for the first time, and I would listen to him say things that just made sense, logical points that made sense. And like I say, a common sense point that you always hear from conservatives is the concept of taxes. You know how if you raise taxes, it hurts the economy, and if you lower taxes, it helps the economy for everybody. The economy gets better when you lower taxes because the people who drive the economy, the businesses, get to keep more of their money, and they have more of their money to drive the economy. And they have more of their money to do things that they ordinarily couldn't do before because they were spending a lot of money on taxes. But once they get to keep their money, and they can handle their money much better than the government can. And as a result, we get better economic activity when the government lowers taxes, and the government actually gets more tax revenue on the back end when they lower taxes than when they raise taxes. So if this is the case, and it absolutely is, why would anybody in their right mind ever advocate for raising taxes then? And who's the ones that always wanted to raise taxes on the rich, pay fair share, even though they never tell you what an actual fair share is? It's Democrats. And again, after listening to Rush Limbaugh and all the other shows, just hearing them make it point after point after point, I could help but become conservative. It took me about a month before I became full-blown conservative because of all the facts that they were giving. Once you look past the nonsense that Rush Limbaugh was a racist, which he absolutely wasn't, and you hear what the man was saying, then you can hear the truth. It's kind of the same thing with Trump. They're trying to tell you that Trump is racist, but when you actually pay attention to Trump and you look at what his policies has done, how do you say this man is racist? And so that's my story on how I became a conservative.
But it's cheaper.
Can you honestly say this is the Republican Party that you grew up on? This modern day GOP?
Yes.
As I've said, many times, I'm not a Republican. The thing is that the Republican candidate usually are more aligned with my views than the Democratic candidate. But as I've also said that if Donald Trump would have ran as a Democrat, guess what? I would have voted for him. Still, not because of what party he's running with, but because of his views. Now, I would ask, Charlemagne, well, are the Democratic Party the same party as the ones that pretty much never done anything for black people? That's really truly the question, because black people aren't really supporting the Republicans. They've been supporting the Democrats. So And I've always said that everything that black people cry about in America, the Democrats did. You know, the party of segregation, the party of the KKK, the party of Jim Crow, the minstrel shows, just basically everything that black people cry about the past, the Democratic Party did, but yet they keep giving blind loyalty to them. So why is he asking the question about the Republican Party when he needs to be questioning the Democrats that so many black people support?
And, you mentioned yourself not to moan and groan, that as long as you work hard, all is well. And I think where the conflict is coming in is you did moan and groan about how the Republicans treated you. You did moan and groan about Governor Newsom and, asking for a recall. You did not leave that up to the voters. You are moaning and groaning when it comes to Donald Trump and how he's being treated. So it just seems to be a hypocrisy. And I don't know if the message would land a little bit better if there was some fairness across the board.
So she accused Larry of moaning about his treatment about the Republican Party. So is Larry moaning here? Well, let's go to Google and look up the definition of moaning based upon Google. Now, according to Google, to moan is a long, low sound made by a person expressing physical or mental suffering or sexual pleasure. Now, there's absolutely nothing that Larry Elder's done that falls in line with that definition. Okay, talking about an issue that you have a problem with is not moaning. Now, Larry Elder is not moaning about anything, nor that he's ever done anything remotely close to moaning while doing his interview. And if you know Larry, he doesn't do any moaning at all. He just brings up the facts. So Larry Elder is not moaning. However, crying and complaining about the same nonsense over and over again, that's not true, that you have no evidence to back up, that right there is moaning. And black people crying about racism, white supremacy is absolutely BMW, as Larry always says, or that stands for bitch moaning and whining about race all day, but yet nobody can give any evidence of it. So this is another false comparison by Taslin here. Clearly, like I said, this woman how is she on the show? Because it doesn't make sense for they can bring the other chick back. At least she was civil. I mean, the light-skinned chick who's biracial, Asian, black, they might as well bring her back. Because at least she wasn't dragging the show down, But like I said, Larry Elder just used the California laws. He used the California laws to do a recall. That's part of the law. That's the same thing anybody would do. So this woman clearly does not know what moaning is, but she's just throwing stuff out there like going down the watering hole that she just keeps saying. That she just kept saying the whole interview.
We're agreeing to two different things. We're not agreeing that there's not systematic racism because we're not in charge of the system, sir. In case you
all right. Can we?
Black people have never been in charge of any system. We're not
actually we have been. Take Baltimore.
No, we've never been in charge of.
May I finish?
Tell me, what financial system are black people in charge of? What healthcare system are black people in charge of? What government system are black people in charge of?
I'm about ready to tell you.
What prison system are black people in charge?
I'm about ready to.
You don't have to be in charge of a system in order to operate within said system. Like, every time you hear black people cry about system and we don't control nothing, we don't have this power, I always ask, well, what system are Asians in charge of? Because they're killing it in America. They're not in charge of anything. And sometimes I've read that even Asian people have some of the lowest voter turnout, yet they're doing so well in this country in spite of. Now, as far as these institutions that she brought up, financial, healthcare, government, and prison, I would immediately turn that back on her, because this is how you destroy these leftists, especially these race hustlers. Anytime they blurt out nonsense, then you hold them up to it. You ask them how it's affecting them. So I would have asked Taslin, Taslin, how are you being, as a black person, being barred from operating in a financial system for getting a loan just because you're black? Give us evidence that the system is keeping you down, preventing you from operating within any financial institution just by simply being black. Of course, she has no evidence. And then I would ask her, tell me how the system is barring you from getting health care, from being able to go and see a doctor. She has no evidence to back that up. And then how is government How are black people being barred from being involved in government and politics? Obviously, we know that's not true. We had a black president for 8 years. And as far as a prison system, you don't have to be in charge of a prison system to not go to the prison. I mean, so you're telling me that if black people were in charge of the prison, they wouldn't be locking these black people up for committing the same crimes that they're committing now, that they're in a prison system that's supposedly controlled by white people? If you don't want to go to jail, as I say, all the people who are always crying about the mass incarceration, then you need to stop the mass crime, and there will be no mass incarceration. Now, kills me is like black people don't get health care. Like, really? All these black people with Medicaid, Medicare getting free health care, all the health care they want, more health care than people out here working. And she's crying about a goddamn healthcare system. You have to literally be in charge of a healthcare system in order to be able to see a doctor. I mean, this woman just, Jesus Christ. And I just want to say this. Just because a white person is in charge of something does not mean all white people are in charge of it. Right? Just because the Bloods and Crips are made up of mostly black people does not mean that all black people are part of the Bloods and Crips. So this is another flawed argument on our part, and that's that flawed logic of hers that, well, if a white person is in charge of something, then somehow all white people are in charge of it and has a say-so in the matter. You know, so if somebody applies for a loan, all white people get a vote on it. That's ridiculous.
Tell you.
I'm not talking about mayors. I already know that talking point, sir. I go on Fox News all the time as well. So let's not go there with that. I said, what system have we created?
Goodness.
Have we implemented that we have been in charge of? Name one.
Is this why you don't like talking to black women, Larry Elder?
Wow. Baltimore. Freddie Gray a few years ago.
No. That's mayors. I'm not talking. I said system.
I'm
Remember,
going to
like
tell
the
you
word
about
system.
this system if you allow me to finish my point.
I'm not talking about somebody elected and doing a job, sir. I asked what system did we create? What financial
Okay, let's
system
talk
did we
about the
create?
system of one of the largest.
Let him say his
Thank
point,
you.
sir.
One of the systems of one of the largest cities in America, Baltimore. Freddie Gray died in police custody a few years ago. The mayor was black. The head of the police department was black. Number two.
It's not in charge of the system, but go ahead.
Number two person in charge of the police department was black.
Still not in charge of the
all of
system.
city council, Democrats, majority black.
Still not in charge of the system.
Wow.
That's a position.
6 officers charged, 3 of them were black. A judge before whom 2 of the officers tried their case, found him not guilty, was black.
Still not in charge of the system.
The city intendant of public schools was black. The county superintendent of public schools was black. The attorney general at the time, Loretta Lynch, is black, as was the president of the United States, was black. And yet,
Still not in charge of the system.
So who's in
I
charge of
asked
the
you a
system?
simple.
So now we're going to have to go back to Google and look up what Google says about the meaning of a system, the definition of a system, because clearly she doesn't know that as either. So according to Google, there are basically 2 meanings for system. They'll give you 2 meanings for system. And of course that always can change. But the first meaning is a set of things working together as a part of a mechanism or an interconnecting network. That's the first meaning of that Google gives. Now the second meaning is a set of principles or procedures according to which something is done, an organized framework or method. So by every metric, what Larry Elder said about Baltimore is true. Black people being in all those positions is control of the system. Because again, by the definition of system, it falls right under there. Again, once again, this woman here, like I said, and she just, the whole entire video, as the interview went on, she just proved that she's an idiot. This woman is stupid. Don't know a damn thing. She's all mouth and no brains. Okay, now, if she is so concerned about being in charge of who's in charge of a system and how black people don't run anything, well then go start a system. Who's stopping her from starting a system for starting a bank where she can give loans to black people? All the black people she wants. And hopefully she can stay in business by doing that, but without any discernment. But go be in charge of a system, Tasman, if you believe that you have to be in charge of a system. Being in charge of a system is so important, even though there's no evidence to back that up. But like I said, this woman, the Breakfast Club needs to get rid of this broad, because all she's gonna do is just make them look bad, and she really made them look bad in this interview. If you watch the whole entirety of the interview. But anyway, I'm gonna stop here at part 3, and I'm gonna finish and sum up with a part 4, because there's still a lot more information and stuff that needs to be talked about that really I want blacks to see and blacks to think about, because this interview is a perfect of how black people are brainwashed. I talked about this all the time, the concept of the brainwashed black, how black people have just been indoctrinated by racism in America. And as of course, I've always said that where it comes from is that typically as a black person, black people have typically been, leftist supporting Democrats. And an average black American, from the time that you're born, you've been indoctrinated into, we vote for Democrats, Republicans, racist white folks, and so on and so forth, racist cops. So by the time you become an adult, you've been so indoctrinated by that you believe it, and it also goes back to that old saying, that Hitler paraphrase: if you tell the lie big enough, long enough, and loud enough, eventually people are going to accept the lie as true. And black people have accepted the lie of, we support Democrats and the Republicans are racist, and the police officers are out to get us. They've accepted this lie as true, even though there's no evidence to support it. But anyway, y'all, as always, until next time.